listener production.
Hey, it's Helen Smith here. Welcome to this bonus episode of The Briefing. Just a heads up that the following chat discusses themes of sexual assault and minors. Controversial OnlyFans star Bonnie Blue is back in the headlines as she's reportedly gearing up for another schoolies showdown. Bonnie's Australian visa was cancelled last year, but she told a current affair this just weeks ago.
I don't want to give too much away, but let's just say I've got good lawyers and I will be doing schoolies this year. I think it's going to frustrate a lot of parents, so I am very excited for schoolies. I think this is going to cause the biggest uproar this year.
With schoolies currently underway, Bonnie also reportedly spent hours spilling hundreds and hundreds of vials of her saliva in order to ensure those who want her back on Aussie shores can still get a hands-on experience with her. Now, I spoke with Bonnie last year over her 2024 schoolies plan to invite quote-unquote barely legal young men attending schoolies on the Gold Coast to have sex and film it for content on her wildly popular OnlyFans account. I also spoke with Harrison James, who was calling for Bonnie's visa to be cancelled at the time. He's a survivor of sexual violence and now works as an activist speaking to consent, sexual violence and the safety of children and young people, who you'll hear from a little later. First though, here's my chat with Bonnie Blue. Bonnie Blue, thanks for joining us on The Briefing. To anyone who doesn't know you, can you tell us who you are and why you're going to schoolies?
Yes, so I'm Bonnie Blue. I'm an adult content creator and I'm attending schoolies to sleep and film content with 18-year-olds.
Now, this isn't the first time you've done this. You've travelled to other countries making this type of content.
Yes.
What's the response been in those places?
Well, from the college students and 18-year-olds themselves, they absolutely love it. However, from the parents, it's a slightly different opinion. It's a very negative, they try and shame it and they try and make out as if it's something that shouldn't be happening.
Why do you think the parents and the colleges might have that response?
I think from a parent's point of view, they see their son always as this really innocent person that, perhaps doesn't even have intercourse or doesn't drink or get up to mischief. So the idea of their son, having sex, especially being filmed, they see it as, massively taboo and that they don't want, their son going near it. Also, it's because the older generation are very uneducated on the sex industry.
Why do you think that this trip in Australia and all the schoolies chat has been getting so much attention?
Because they're 18. And I am aware that some of the people that go to schoolies are 17. However, they are not the ones I'm filming content with. And these people that are giving me hate and trying to cause this drama are misinformed. They're saying, okay, Bonnie is doing something wrong because she's sleeping with people underage. She's sleeping with people that are not consenting. Whereas if they was to spend 5 minutes educating themselves, they'd realise, she makes them fill in consent forms. They have to breathalyse the test and they do consent. Whereas they're just so narrow-minded on thinking, she's sleeping with people underage, she's a predator, she's a criminal. However, that is not the case and never has been.
Touching on that issue of consent, how do you ensure that the men that are participating are consenting to being part or being filmed or consenting?
Of course. So obviously, as soon as someone contacts me or they're queuing up outside, they're fully aware it's going to be filmed. And the process starts, whether they've been queuing downstairs for multiple hours, they come upstairs, they have to have ID with them and then they have to fill in 2 consent forms. One form which mentions drinking and alcohol and confirming that the ID they have brought with them is themselves. And the other form they sign is an OnlyFans release form, which explains where the content is going to be, the fact I have the rights to the content and they're agreeing for me to film the footage and the fact they've not been forced or anyone is, making them be there that day.
Do you have an age limit on who can sign these consent forms?
Of course, they've got to be 18.
How do you monitor this intake of drugs and alcohol when you're doing these consent forms? I know you've mentioned that you do breathalyzer checks.
Yes, yeah. So there's a breathalyzer test and these, obviously, like I said, the consent forms. The standard of breathalyzer test is the same standard of what the police use. So, like I said, as long as I'm abiding by the law, I don't know what anyone else wants me to do. Unless they literally want the government sat into the bedroom or they want the parliament to come and join me, which, they're welcome to. I don't know at what point we draw the line because as long as I'm abiding by the law, Do we start having cameras watching us 24/7 around what we're doing? Like, at what point, as long as, like I said, I'm going by the law, at what point do then we allow someone to have their own life? Like, should I have cameras on me 24/7? Like, government watching in the bedroom? So people need to decide what sort of independent world we want to live in.
Men have had a lot to say about the work that you do and what you're planning on doing at schoolies. What do you say to men who feel you're over-sexualising barely legal teens and linking that with taking their virginity and masculinity in a harmful way?
Sex is not taking away anyone's masculinity at all. That's coming from someone that's insecure themselves. And it's their bodies and it's their decision. This content isn't for everyone, nor is it made for everyone. Everyone's got their own hobbies and things they enjoy. And just because perhaps those guys wouldn't enjoy that content or wouldn't like to get involved, doesn't mean their sons or their brothers wouldn't want to.
Speaking of the government, there have been calls for your visa to be banned or you to be deported. What is your response to that?
This petition, it's mainly sort of kicked off on TikTok. And it's the same people that are saying, oh, we need to get this girl banned because what she's doing is a criminal offence and she's a predator and she's sleeping with underage people. However, they're not underage. I'm not a predator. So they're signing something of false allegations. If the police had something wrong with it or if it was against the law, yes, sign the petition. However, that is not the case. So they're signing it just because they don't like the content I make. However, if they was to spend 5 minutes looking on the hub, you'd see schoolgirl is the trending search. And they seem to have no problem with the fact schoolgirls can dress up and have done for Halloween for many, many years. And they don't seem to have no problem with that. Whereas I seem to have switched the roles. And, it's schoolboys as opposed to being a schoolgirl. And they've got a problem with that. So why haven't they got an issue with schoolgirls?
As you just said, we've often talked about the environment in the opposite, and it's a very normalised trope amongst older men engaging sex with younger women, specifically because they are young.
Yeah.
When you use the terms barely legal and we see content like this is my first time on Pornhub and other platforms like that, do you think that you'd be getting the same level of criticism if you were a man doing this?
I think I'd get less, and which is probably strange to say because my comment section is filled with, if this was a guy, we'd be, there'd be an uproar. If this was a guy, we'd be giving him so much hate. However, I am getting, as you would have seen, endless amounts of hate and death threats. So it makes no difference if I was a guy because I'm getting hate. And I also get hate because people are saying, if she was a guy, she'd be getting hate. So they sort of continue to give me the hate as if I was a guy, even though I'm not. And then obviously give me hate for being a female myself. And like I said, it's confusing because this is coming from women which want equality and they want women's rights. So why have they got an issue? Why haven't they got an issue with the schoolgirls? So they seem to pick and choose when they want to have an issue with women's rights and equality.
Part of the criticism surrounding consent specifically is that these men are too young, they're barely legal, they're barely legal adults. They are able to sign a form, but they might not be able to fully understand the ramifications of their choices. That, if they do agree to be filmed, it'll be on the internet forever and they might want to withdraw consent at some point. Yeah. Do you acknowledge that they might be able to withdraw their consent or that they might not fully understand what they're actually about to sign up to?
Yeah, they can withdraw consent, that's no problem. But in terms of them not understanding, it's a pathetic comment because we have said nowadays kids are glued to the phone. Oh my God, kids live on social media. They're always online. The younger generation have grew up on their phones. They understand social media more than me and you. So why are we then trying to pretend 18-year-olds don't understand a digital footprint and they don't understand social media? They have got better knowledge than me, especially their middle-aged parents. Because say if their mum was to go and buy a new phone or they had something wrong with their phone or something technical, I can guarantee you they'll be asking their sons or they're going to be asking, their kids for help on their phone. So it makes me laugh that then suddenly these parents that haven't grown up with social media and have very little understanding, and just like the mayor himself said, I don't really understand OnlyFans, yet they decided to comment on it, even though he just acknowledged the fact he didn't understand it himself. So yeah, like I said, people like to pick and choose when we discriminate against 18-year-olds. We like to pretend they don't know what they're doing. Yeah, we're happy for them to sign up to the army and make their own decisions. But if they also use their own bodies and consent to sex, suddenly they're not allowed.
Returning to the calls to ban your visa, if you are deported, what would you do? Will you fight it if people want you to leave?
Well, I move into the US next year anyway, so I've got no problem. I'm literally coming for schoolies, collecting my pets, and I'm off my way. So I've got no problem. I want to grow in the industry, and Australia is too, in the nice way possible, just not the best place to do that for the industry I'm in. Too reserved, and it's got nice beaches, but that's as far as it goes.
How do you feel about the controversy? I know you mentioned there, like, you do want to grow your platform, you want to grow your name and your brand in a sense. Part of the job of being an adult content creator is getting lots of people to consume your content and sign up. Is this controversy actually good for you? And are you engaging with it on purpose?
100%. Every time there's an article, I share it on my platform. Anytime there's a hate comment, I use it to promote my next video. Like the current petition to get me cancelled is the promotion for my OF video. The more taboo they're making it sound, the more it boosts me. And the more people I've got commenting hate or, especially the women saying, oh my God, this girl's content is so out there. It is pushing their husbands and their sons to be more intrigued and want to watch it. So anytime I see these TikTok videos and they've become obsessed with me or they're just trying to give me hate, it does nothing other than drive my money up and my bank balance is going through the roof. So honestly, it's more thanks to my subscribers, but thank you to the haters because you really are making me rich.
Speaking of the haters, what do you say to anyone listening that, after everything we've discussed, that would still describe you as a predator? What would you say to them?
Google it. I'm not a predator. That's something that's not legal. Everything I'm doing is legal. So spend 5 minutes educating yourself. I can understand my content isn't for everyone. I can understand why you might not agree with it or you think I might not have morals. But what is wrong is sending me death threats and saying that, what I'm doing, is illegal. It's not. And people are saying, I'm going to report you to the police. And in the second part of their sentence is saying, hey, I can't wait to put you under the ground or I can't wait to come and stamp your head in. And I just think you need to start reflecting on the messages you're sending. If anyone's going to get reported to the police, it's you for sending a death threat. I enjoy the experience, so do they. And my content isn't made for the women. So I'm sorry it frustrates you, but at the same time, it's not for you and nor are you the one that subscribes to the content. And if this uproar was coming from the people I'm sleeping with, and there's no secret that I sleep with a high amount of people, if they was coming forward saying, I didn't enjoy my experience or actually I withdrew consent and she didn't follow through with that, then yes, I would be completely changing my attitude with the way I do things. But there's been hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people I've slept with and I've not had one complaint yet. I've basically got 5 stars on TripAdvisor. So until that changes, then I'm still continuing.
Bonnie Blue, thanks so much for joining us on The Briefing.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Now let's hear from Harrison James, a survivor of sexual violence and advocate for young people, on why he called the hotel that Bonnie was planning to stay at during schoolies in 2024 and why he thinks Bonnie Blue is a predator. Harrison, welcome to The Briefing. Can you tell us who you are and why you care about what Bonnie Blue is doing in Australia?
Of course. Well, my name's Harrison James. I'm an activist and a survivor of child sexual abuse. I use my story to try and initiate some change and use my lived experience to, inform the community and educate the community as well. Look, I want to start this by saying this is not an attack on anyone who creates or consumes pornography. That's not what I'm here to do. That's an individual choice. I'm not here to bring about shame onto that. What I am here to do as someone who has survived child sexual abuse and now campaigns extensively for youth protection is bring forward that understanding that throughout adolescence, young boys particularly, are frequently exposed to these damaging messages throughout mainstream pornography that reinforces harmful beliefs, that their worth and their masculinity are tied to any and all sexual conquests. So when OnlyFans creators like Bonnie Blue and Annie Knight specifically target, quote, barely legal boys, in environments like schoolies, it exacerbates a pre-existing issue. It is a societal grooming of young men to equate any and all sexual encounters, even if it's exploitative, with status and validation. So this environment is further complicated by, adding factors like alcohol and and the emotional intensity of the celebrations as well. And the questions that I ask is, how can we be certain that no underage or impaired individual slips through the cracks and becomes a victim of predatory behaviour? And I just think the current safeguards and age verification processes are not foolproof. And when it comes to the exploitation of young boys or young people more broadly, I honestly believe through my lived experience that the stakes are just too high when dealing with young people navigating that sort of newfound independence, right? My aim, again, just to reiterate, is not to shame anyone who creates this content, but just to ensure that conversations about this issue prioritise the safety and well-being of youth, and that we as a society hold accountable those who might exploit those vulnerabilities.
Now, Bonnie has maintained that what she's doing isn't illegal. In your view, what is wrong with what she's doing?
It's the conditioning that these young boys go through when they're consuming mainstream pornography. And that's no fault of Bonnie as an individual. That's a societal issue that we need to tackle. But Bonnie is specifically exploiting that conditioning. And I know firsthand now, with hindsight, that I was blatantly exploited in the most extreme circumstance. Now, I'm not here suggesting at all that Bonnie Blue is sexually abusing young children. That is not the point at all. But what she is preying on is that societal conditioning that leads up to that point where they're 18, where these young, impressionable boys who perceive this as their ticket to validation and manhood. And that's wrong. 5 minutes of naivety for these boys is going to be a lifetime of profit for someone like Bonnie Blue. That's literally the definition of exploitation. And I just think that these boys specifically don't understand that these videos, once they're out there, they're ubiquitous. It's there forever.
As you've mentioned, you've said that this behaviour from the adult content creator comes from a dangerous culture where boys are taught to see sexual encounters as their ticket to validation and manhood. Can you further explain what you mean by that?
So when I hear about what's unfolding at schoolies or what is about to unfold at schoolies, these are adult content creators planning to take advantage of newly turned 18s. It hits me deeply. And these teenagers are barely adults and are still navigating their own sense of self and boundaries. They're still trying to form that within themselves. And mainstream pornography has already heavily conditioned these young people, but specifically young men, making them feel that any sexual encounter equates to validation and social status. It's like the highest form of social currency to have sex. It's troubling, and for me personally, it's heartbreaking to think that a place meant for celebration, right, could turn into a space for potential exploitation. And this is why it's critical for society to prioritise the safety of our youth and call out harmful behaviour that puts them at risk.
Earlier you said you don't have an issue with sex work, but in your own words you were very critical of sex work. You've described it as societal grooming. Doesn't that mean that you do have a fundamental problem with sex work generally?
So not with the act of sex work itself, but with the mainstream porn conglomerates that are pitted against these young boys. I mean, imagine I gave the keys to my car to my 9-year-old daughter and said, there you go, drive the car, you'll be right, it's all yours. And then she inevitably crashes that car, and then I blame her. I put all the onus on her for the thing she's made, but really the onus should be on me. My point is that we cannot expect to throw young people into the deep end of the internet where everything is at their fingertips and then blame them for what's coming out of that. When we pit conglomerates against vulnerable individuals, it's not a fair fight at all. That's what my issue is, not with the act of sex work itself. Sex work is real work. I want to make that abundantly clear. And I never want to shame anyone who creates content or consumes it. It's really important that that message is out there, because that is not what this conversation is about. This is about calling out blatant exploitation. It's a very different thing.
How do you, in your example, how do you stop someone from giving a young boy the keys to the car to drive?
Yeah, it literally is education. Informing young people about porn literacy and holding the right people to account as well. People who go out of their way to exploit young people should be held accountable. I know you're probably going to ask a question about the deportation, right? And I'm going to lead it into your question now. And we're seeing a lot of rhetoric online, right, that has gone to these real extremes where people are asking, imagine if this was a man exploiting young girls. And we already know that that's a huge problem within society. We can't even pretend that it's not. Or they're calling for Bonnie's deportation and for her visa to be revoked. I mean, these are reactive, short-term solutions that aren't realistic, and it's easy to fall into that trap on social media. I understand that because that's a space that is built on instantaneous reaction and commentary. And yes, I wholeheartedly agree with the point that proactive measures are essential to prevent this specific situation from happening. But all of that noise, it really risks distracting from the deeper conversation that I aim to bring forward with my activism. And that's the exploitation of children and young people in this country. Now, in Australia, 1 in 3 girls and 1 in 5 boys will be sexually abused before their 18th birthday. That's the stats from the Australian Child Maltreatment Study in 2023. And we know that those stats are probably underreported because of the mechanism of shame and how that operates, right? Now, I honestly do believe that Bonnie Blue's actions are predatory, but I'm by no means implying that she is sexually abusing young children. But what this conversation is doing, or what I hope that it will do, is require us as a society to be more introspective, to be more aware of how we take action in our own lives to combat this exploitation and protect children and young people.
You've called Meriton Sweets about Bonnie Blue and another sex worker, Annie Knight's participation in schoolies. What was your goal in doing that?
It was a preventative measure, and one, to try take some proactive action to stop that from occurring. And you never know, that person that I called might be on site that day, remember the conversation that I had with them and try intervene from a young person being exploited. That's a very real possibility. But also what I wanted to showcase to the broader public is the power of positive action. Instead of just getting online and jumping up and down about a situation, getting out there and making a difference. I know a phone call is just a small thing to make, but it could be the impetus to a broader conversation, to more action that could be taken from that. And my goal with that, Meriton Sweets, their response was very proactive and they've stated to me that they are taking action, and we'll see if that, comes to fruition. But I was hoping that that call would be the impetus for a broader conversation where we could get Meriton Sweets to have some accountability and hopefully create a safer, more supportive environment for young people during a pivotal sort of life experience like schoolies, yeah.
Isn't by making that call vigilantism?
No, not in the slightest. It's a preventative measure to make sure we're protecting young people. It's not vigilantism at all. I think it's not enough to simply call out Bonnie Blue's actions. We need systemic change. And as an activist, I have an immense sense of mission and inner purpose to see a difference within society. We need that comprehensive education. We need to foster conversation. I don't think it was particularly dramatic action to make that phone call. I think it's an everyday thing that people do. And it has actually been the impetus for those conversations for people. And I'm proud of it. To make that phone call and to see the level that it's gone in the last few days as of recording this, I think what I hope to lead into is that boys should be taught that consent is not just about saying yes, but understanding the power dynamics and the emotional repercussions that are involved. They should learn that being featured in content like this isn't necessarily a badge of honour, but a decision that can have lasting impacts on their mental health and future. And I think Bonnie Blue's actions are not isolated either. They're emblematic of a larger issue where influencers and content creators are able to sort of blur those lines between morality and legality for profit, right? So I think it's a reminder that society's obsession with sort of fame and virality, it can cloud our judgment a lot of the time and turning what should be clear cases of predatory behaviour into moments of controversy rather than accountability.
You're describing the people participating in making content with her as boys, but are they adult men, at least in a legal sense? Are you giving them a free pass by describing adult men in this way?
Not at all. Not at all. I think, again, as I've articulated, these young men on paper at 18 years old, they can legally consent. I'm fully aware of that point. But it's what predates that societal conditioning that gets them to that point and makes them feel as though their manhood or their worth is tied to this sort of sexual conquest that they feel as though they need to adhere to. So yes, legally, it might be perceived as okay, but morally, it is a total corruption of the protection of youth.
Men are overwhelmingly her audience, and she wouldn't be making the content if no one was consuming it. What do you want to say to anyone listening who wants to consume her content?
Well, I'd be really cautious of who wants to consume that content. Who in the world wants to watch an 18-year-old boy who just got out of school and is at schoolies? Who wants to watch that? That's another question that this conversation brings up. Who is this content actually for? And why do we seek out that sort of category type that we see in mainstream porn? I remember when I was being sexually abused and watching pornography. In my case, I would see sort of categories like teen fantasy or whatever, and that would just confirm that my abuse was okay, that it was normal. And are we really at that point in a society now where those lines are being blurred? And there needs to be this culture of accountability, and we're not seeing that.
Bonnie did say that they can withdraw consent at any time and afterwards as well. What do you say to that?
As far as I'm concerned, there's no legitimate measure to say that video won't go beyond that platform that it's originally uploaded to. Once it's out there, it's out there. And consent is breached once it goes beyond that, just what you can control. Once it's out there, it goes beyond that control. There's many circumstances that we hear where victims of sexual exploitation who have had their abuse filmed for content, I say that with quotations because it's abusive, and they can't get it down. They're trying and trying and trying, and they just, their hands are tied because of these conglomerates and these essentially big porn.
Harrison, thanks for joining us on The Briefing.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
That was Harrison James there, and earlier you heard from Bonnie Blue. Thanks for listening to this bonus episode of The Briefing. That's it for now. Before you go though, if you could follow and subscribe wherever you're listening from and rate The Briefing, it's a really easy way you can support everything we do here on the show. And you can check us out on Instagram at The Briefing Podcast. I'm Helen Smith. Catch you next time.